History doesn't always turn on a single dramatic moment. Sometimes it turns when giants, completely exhausted from fighting each other for centuries, finally just stumble. This is one of those stories. It's about the end of an entire era and how two of the world's greatest empires were shattered in less than a decade. Accumulated strain. That's the whole ballgame right there. Our story is all about that strain and about the final catastrophic crack that appeared. It's about two ancient powers who bled each other dry for so long that they didn't even see the real threat until it was way, way too late. Okay, so let's set the stage. Our two main players here are the superpowers of the early 7th century, the Eastern Roman Empire, who we usually call the Byzantines, and the Sasanian Persian Empire. For hundreds of years, these two were basically the two poles of the known world. But by the time we get to our story, they had been locked in decades of absolutely savage, total war. I mean, just try to imagine it. Entire regions just devastated, cities changing hands over and over again, and whole generations of people who knew nothing but constant conflict. So by the time their last big war finally sputtered out, yeah, there was peace, but it was a peace born from pure bottom-of-the-barrel exhaustion. And what's really incredible is just how spookily similar their problems were. I mean, look at this. Both had empty treasuries. Both had their armies bled white. Both had their heartland provinces torn apart. They'd become perfect mirror images of each other's weakness and decay. And this right here, this gets to the absolute heart of the matter. If you looked at a map, these empires still looked enormous, powerful, like they'd be there forever. But it was an illusion. They had survived their last great war against each other, sure, but they weren't strong. They were hollow. So you've got this massive power vacuum, right? This landscape of two exhausted empires just trying to catch their breath. And into that void steps something new. A catalyst that's going to turn all those little cracks into a complete, world-shattering collapse. A new power explodes out of the Arabian Peninsula, unified under the Rashidun Caliphate. This was the first caliphate right after the Prophet Muhammad. Now, at first, their movements were just seen as, frontier skirmishes, stuff that the great empires could easily dismiss. But these weren't just raids. Oh no, this was the first gust of wind before the hurricane. And to really get your head around how fast everything fell apart, you have to understand this idea of a cascading campaign. This wasn't one big, single invasion. Think of it more like a series of relentless, lightning-fast, coordinated punches that hit every single weak spot, turning a small vulnerability into a total system failure. So let's talk about the first giant to fall, the mighty Sasanian Empire. The knockout blow, the single battle that really sealed its fate, happened at a place called Al-Qadisiyah. Now, on paper, you'd think the Sasanians would have just rolled right over this new threat. Come on, they had war elephants, heavy cavalry, the whole 9 yards, plus the prestige of an ancient empire. But the reality? Their command was a mess, totally fractured by internal politics. Their opponents, though, they were fast, they were stubborn, and they were fighting as one. So here's how it went down. The Sasanian shock tactics, the elephants and the cavalry charge, they worked at first, caused a lot of chaos. But the battle didn't end. It just ground on for days. The invading forces didn't break. They just kept coming back, hitting them again and again, relentlessly. And eventually, the once unbeatable Persian army just dismantled. It broke apart. And just like that, the road to their capital city was wide open. That was it. Hundreds of years of imperial history just gone. One superpower completely and utterly finished. So what about the other giant? Well, the Byzantines saw what happened to their old rivals and just knew they were next. So they decided they were going to gather every last bit of strength they had to end this threat, right here, right now. The Emperor Heraclius himself put together a massive professional army, pulling troops from all over the eastern provinces. This was not some border skirmish. This was the empire striking back with everything it had. The plan was simple. Crush the invaders and take back control for good. And notice the contrast here too. The Byzantine army was enormous. It was professional. But it was also a really complex machine full of different ethnic groups, rival generals, all of which created major headaches with coordination. Their opponents, on the other hand, used what you'd call an elastic defense. They'd bend, but they wouldn't break. And then they'd hit back with these incredibly precise cavalry strikes. The battle starts with the Imperial army just marching forward, these huge waves of legionaries. But their attacks just get soaked up and thrown back. They wear themselves out on an enemy that won't break. And then the counterattacks come. Fast, coordinated strikes that find the weak spots, the seams in the Imperial line, and they just rip it open. And once that line broke, the retreat, trapped by the deep ravines of the Yarmouk River, turned into an absolute catastrophe. The consequences of Yarmouk were devastating, and they were permanent. Syria, gone, forever. And right after that, Egypt, the breadbasket that fed the whole empire, it fell too. Now, the Byzantine Empire survived, which is more than you can say for Persia, but it was fundamentally changed. It went from a global superpower to a much smaller regional state literally fighting for its life. All right, let's pull the camera all the way back now and look at the huge picture. These two battles, Al-Qadisiyah and Yarmouk, they didn't just conquer a few provinces, they completely remade the world. This slide just shows you how breathtakingly fast the change was. We're talking about a single generation, 30 years. In that tiny span of time, the map of the Middle East went from a centuries-old stalemate between Rome and Persia to the dawn of a new Islamic ascendancy. It is without a doubt one of the fastest and most dramatic geopolitical shifts in all of human history. And this brings us right back to the central, uncomfortable truth for these old empires. The force that beat them wasn't materially stronger. They didn't have better weapons or bigger cities. They were just faster, more unified, and they happened to be fighting opponents who were already on their knees from decades of self-inflicted wounds. And that's really the bottom line, isn't it? Most wars, they adjust the maps a little bit, they redraw a few borders. This campaign, this one erased an entire empire from history and permanently broke the other. Which leaves us with a final question, one that really never gets old. An empire can look so powerful on the surface, right? Eternal, unconquerable. But how strong is it really when it's already cracking from the inside?